We've given a few updates surrounding the HHS payments, the Provider Relief Fund payments that are now available in phase four. And if you weren't aware, or you haven't seen our previous updates, I'd encourage you to go back and take a look at those. It describes this a bit more in depth, but basically there's about $25.5 billion that are going to be distributed to healthcare providers across the country. And we want to make sure that you have the best information for when you go to actually fill out the application. By the way, the application deadline is October 26th. So you want to make sure that you get that done and in time. The application is now actually available, and we'll put that link also down below in the description of this particular video. Now, what today's clarification is there's a lot of confusion surrounding the terminology rural, because about half the money is really going to be dedicated to those that serve as far as the rural population. And so a lot of times what a lot of providers believe is that if your office is in a rural area, then you would qualify for those payments. But actually, they describe this a bit more broadly. And the way this works, by the way, is it's really simple. It's kind of an on-off switch. Either you're eligible for those payments or you're not eligible. Now, how much you receive will depend on how many patients you would see in those particular areas. But what happens is on the application, it's like question 21 or so, it will ask you, select yes if your organization would like to be considered for an additional ARP rural payment. Now, the hang up there for a lot of doctors is the term rural, especially if you're in Chicago or in some of the surrounding metro area, because that's not rural, right? However, it's important to understand how HHS defines rural. And they, in this particular instance, are allowing you to apply for these funds if you operate in or if you serve patients that live in the HHS Federal Office of Rural Health Policy definition of a rural area. In other words, you don't actually have to practice in those areas, but you do have to either practice in those areas or serve patients in those areas to qualify. Now, there are going to be many of our doctors that are in non-rural areas that will have plenty of their patients who come in from out of town, maybe drive in from one of the smaller surrounding areas that would be considered rural. In those cases, you are eligible for those payments. So it's whether you practice in or treat a patient that lives in those rural areas. And so that's an important distinction. That's the biggest clarification I want you to take away from today. If you want to know what those rural areas are, so if you want to get and put an eyeball on it, kind of what that looks like, what you can do is jump out to HHS's kind of their search website. Now, we've given you a short link and a link to this, and that's ilcairo.org/rural. That's ilcairo.org/rural for you to go out and take a look at. What I would recommend you do, just key in your office address and it'll tell you whether or not you're in that rural area. Again, that's only one part of it. Then you can actually blow out and look at a larger portion of the map to see, do you have any patients that are in that surrounding area? If you happen to be in more of a metro area, do you have any patients that are in one of those rural areas that are defined? So kind of the map comes up, zoom out, and then you can see exactly what some of those areas are and get a good idea. Do you have patients that are in those particular areas? And then you would check yes on box 21. And then you're considered for payments in regards to those, to serving those patients or operating a practice within those rural areas. Hopefully this helps you out. We'll drop some links down here in the lower section, and we'll catch you next week.